You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. I'm glad to have everyone here with me today. I'm sure some other folks will be coming through in a moment. I appreciate you all for being here. Today we're going to read a paper that I promised to read last week, actually on Saturday, when Only Tase and I from the Pro-Black Perspective podcast here on KWAZ Radio did a show together where we were talking about Nkrumah versus Nyerere and their approach to a United States of Africa. So this paper I'm reading today is written by Julius Nyerere himself. It's titled a United States of Africa. So this should be a good show, and it should tie us right back to what we were talking about the previous episode. Hey, if you're new here today, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, click the bell to be notified when I'm on again. And if you're not new here, you know, peace to all of you, but make sure to click the bell. Make sure to click the like button. Those likes eventually do add up, and they are pretty helpful. So make sure you like the show right now. Hey, if you are not familiar, or even if you are, you should know that this show is a part of a podcast network. Podcast network is called KWAZ Radio. Want you guys to check out KWAZ Radio. Make sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also check out the other shows that are available on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Check out those shows as well as the Queen's Council podcast. The Queen's Council podcast has been putting out episodes a bunch these days. We want to support them, encourage them to keep putting out shows. You know, the Pro-Black Perspective does their thing, especially on Sundays with the Sunday worship. And check out the Harsh Reality Podcast for the latest news and content coming out of Black society as well. Before I start to read this paper, I just want to grab this invite link. And if our moderators are around, you can copy this link and post it in the chat room a couple times during the reading of the paper. The paper is actually a short paper tonight, so we shouldn't take too long getting through it. But again, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the last episode I did, the crossover event with the Pro-Black Perspective, talking about Nkrumah versus Nyerere. Tonight we're going to read Nyerere himself, his writings on the idea of the United States of Africa. So here we go. There is one sense in which African unity already exists. There's a sentiment of Africanness, a feeling of mutual involvement, which pervades all the political and cultural life of the continent. Nationalist leaders all over Africa feel themselves to be part of a greater movement, They recognize a special responsibility to the political unit in which they happen to belong, but feel personally involved in the triumphs and setbacks of all other African countries. There is, in other words, an emotional unity which finds expression in, among other things, concepts such as, quote unquote, the African personality, and a tendency to consult together at international conferences. But with all this, African unity is at present merely an emotion born of a history of colonialism and oppression. It has to be strengthened and expressed in economic and political forms before it can really have a positive effect on our future. The position can be compared to that of a number of brothers crossing a maelstrom on parallel and joined rope bridges, each burdened with balancing poles and weights, as well as his own building equipment. A single broad structure with firm foundations would enable all to cross more easily, enable loads to be carried jointly where appropriate, and eliminate the danger of one brother overbalancing the other by inadvertently shaking the holding wire. Indissoluble African unity is the stone bridge which would enable us all to walk in safety over this whirlpool of power politics and enable us to carry more easily the economic and social loads which now threaten to overwhelm us. For the sake of all African states, large or small, African unity must come, and it must be real unity. Our goal must be a United States of Africa. Only this can really give Africa the future her people deserve after centuries of economic uncertainty and social oppression. This goal must be achieved, and it does not matter whether this is done by one step or by many, or through economic, political, or social development. The only thing which should matter to us now is how to get African unity as quickly as possible. You guys might remember one of the first shows I did of 2021 was an open discussion on how do you bring about unity, right? That's a very interesting question that, you know, what we came out of it saying and thinking is you got to be able to push the benefits of unity, and you got to push the punishments of not being unified, right? Let's see what Nyerere talks about here in the chat room. I see we got a couple people live with us, watching live. You guys make sure to click the like button, right? Make sure to click the like button. We got NYC Beauties saying peace to everyone. Peace to you too. Kevin Care 42 says greetings. You guys check out NYC Beauties YouTube page. Go there and like all the content. There's all pictures of beautiful black women. Go like the content and make sure to subscribe to their channel as well. All right. To continue. Historically, areas of the world have been unified by two methods: by conquest or by negotiated terms of association. So there's two methods he talks about from a historical basis to achieve unity: by conquest or by negotiated terms of association. It is absurd to imagine African unity coming from the domination of one African country over the other. Again, go back and check out our joint episode with the pro-black perspective, and you'll learn about something very interesting, right? Unity can only be negotiated unity, for it is the unity of equals. The boundaries which divide African states are so nonsensical that without our sense of unity, there would be a cause of friction. We have no alternative but to start from the position which we inherited after the colonial partition of Africa. So he doesn't talk about redrawing borders, right? It would seem. He's saying it is what it is, right? Let's build from here. Okay? To continue, there is no one country which does not include areas which would come under another political unit if any principles of political geography were considered. Numerous tribes live in at least two countries or have their origins in some other area of Africa. If for us to start making quote-unquote claims on each other's territory would be to play into the hands of those who wish to keep Africa weak so as to improve their own relative strength in the future. And it might well lead us to the tragic absurdity of spending money on armaments while our people die for want of medical attention or starve from want of knowledge. I see in the chat room we got KW Don 7 in the room. Peace to you, KW Don 7. Peace, thanks for being here once again. Right? In the sphere of boundaries, as in all others, we must start our quest for African unity from the facts of our historical inheritance. We have been divided as long as history is known. In consequence, we all have varied experiences, different degrees of economic development, even varied, quote-unquote, international languages. Yet for all this, African unity is a natural thing, which must and can come on the basis of willing association between the peoples of Africa. Our disunity and our common experience of alien domination have impressed us all with the need for unity, and given us an all-African sympathy, which is combined with close ties to our own village. What we want, therefore, is unity of action together with the greatest possible degree of local self-expression on things which affect only that locality. This will be in accordance with the oldest traditions of Africa. It will be a new growth on the deep roots of our life. So in case you weren't there for that talk that we did last time, Nkrumah wanted an all-out, all at the same time, creation of a United States of Africa. And I get that. I do. Nyerere believed in doing it by region. So Nyerere and Jomo Kenyatta and a few others were going to try to create an East African Federation, right? And I'm guessing the hopes would have been that East followed by West, South, etc., to create these federations that will then come together, right? And that's how you get your United States of Africa, right? The question I asked on Twitter as a poll, which ended today, had 75% of people were down with Julius Nyerere's way of coming about the United States of Africa versus Nkrumah's. I am not sure if the paper that we read and discussed, if that's what kind of swayed people, because the paper kind of did lean heavily towards Nyerere. It did kind of show the ugly side of Nkrumah, right? So, perhaps people were swayed a little bit. But I do believe that there's some merit to trying to get everyone on board all at once, as opposed to piecemeal, which allows people to see what was done previously and throw a monkey wrench into what is supposed to be going on in the future. To continue. It is said that because African unity must be a result of the free decision of the peoples of Africa, it must therefore be something less than unity. I do not believe this is true. The new pride in national independence, the new consciousness of national sovereignty, is certainly a factor which will affect the method by which we shall achieve our goal. but it must not be allowed to deflect us from our purposes. Cooperation between African states in certain economic fields or coordination of educational plans will be valuable, but they are not in themselves sufficient to bring the benefits of unity or rid us of the dangers which come from disunity. As long as there remain separate African nations, there will remain too a danger that other states will exploit our differences for their own purposes. Only with unity can we ensure that Africa really governs Africa. Only with unity can we be sure that African resources will be used for the benefit of Africa. Put that on a t-shirt, underdog. Our goal must remain firm. Nothing short of the United States of Africa should be accepted as our ultimate destiny. This does not mean that we must or that we could achieve the goal tomorrow in one step. We must progress towards it as and when we can, either by all African decisions or by steps towards unity in different areas of Africa. So we see Nyerere recognizes that you don't necessarily want or would be able to create this United States of Africa in one step, but but he also recognizes that you can attempt it, right? Right, you can attempt it. So he does give some credence to the idea. To continue, although the goal must be clear, it would, however, be wrong to think in detail of the shape of government in a united Africa. I think this is an interesting thought right here. This will be affected by the road we have to travel to get there, as well as by the demands made on a state by world affairs at the relevant time. But this lack of clarity should not stop us now. And that's an important point. That's an important point. You don't have to have all the answers now. Now, what I will say, when we look back at the African leaders during the independence run of several African continents, right? During the early independence run especially, right? What I will say as an observer now, as a person reading these papers and looking it up, right? Doing research, I will say a lot of African leaders seemingly didn't think things through enough. And I will say, I think that's something that we do have to do better with when we're talking about this United States of Africa or this African unity or Pan-Africanism or however you want to frame it. We've got to do a better job at devising a plan and knowing, to some extent what it is we really want to see, right? But there is a strong point here that you don't have to have it all figured out. Right, and this goes to even being organized or creating like an organization to organize our people, right? You know that the end goal that you want is unity, is being organized, being ready. You can work towards, the more clear the more clear demands, right, at the relevant time. But for now, you just want to get the people in a space together, with ideas pumping, shovel ready, so to speak, just ready to get this work done, right? And you got to move towards it. So the idea is you don't have to wait. You can start doing some work today, right? But this lack of clarity should not stop us now. When the nationalist movements in the different countries started campaigning for independence, they did not stop to argue about the ideal type of government for their country, to my point. They decided only that it was necessary to wrest sovereignty from the alien power. Its use and its form were decided according to the circumstances, time of victory. All right? So it should be with our new campaign for African unity. There are lessons which can be drawn from the independence struggle. The freedom struggle was always seen as an all-African matter. Yet each country got its advancement as it could. Ghana did not refuse to take advantage of her own progress because other African countries had not reached the same position. This is him dealing with Ghana, right? Ghana did not refuse to take advantage of her own progress because other African countries had not reached the same position. Neither did Tanganyika delay independence because of the difficulties of Kenya and Uganda, despite the fact that we are all involved in a common market. Indeed, when the suggestion was made that Tanganyika might delay independence for a few months in the hope of combining the freedom and unity struggles, there was a widespread feeling that she could help more by going ahead on her own. In other words, a piecemeal progress was accepted as inevitable and right. Certainly, time has shown that as more and more countries have achieved independence, pressures which can be mounted against the colonialists in other parts of Africa have increased. I see there's some activity in the chat room. Kevin K42 says we have to move forward. And if it is only a little of us, so be it. Other people will come on board eventually when they get sick and tired of the situation. Absolutely. You just got to move forward and do your part. You know, move forward, do your part. And if you're doing good work, right, people will come, right? People will come through and take up shovels as well, right? So, you know, this paper, which I'm about halfway through already, this paper is showing you how to go about doing work, right? Sometimes, if you wait for everyone to be on the same page, right, sometimes that act can be detrimental in getting done the work that you want to do. Sometimes it's just better for you to go ahead, and by going ahead, you're more helpful to those people who weren't ready to do the work that needs to be done, right? So that's what you have to do. And you know, I've been trying not to talk about it as much these days, but that's what the curriculum is about. And the whole curriculum project is quiet because work is being done slowly behind the scenes, right? And soon enough, you'll be able to see some parts of it. And hopefully when you see some parts of it, hopefully you guys will come through and start to expedite the process. Come through shovel ready. In the chat room, you can see the moderator, Kevin K42, posted the Discord link. Click that link if you want to join the Discord. Discord app is free. Come through, join the Discord. Let us know you're there. Let us know you're there, ready to help, shovel in hand, and let's get some work done. All right. Let me pause here for a quick station ID, and I'll come back on the other side and finish up the paper.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
And we're back. You guys, make sure to check out the Queen's Council podcast. Check out the last episode of this show that I did with Only to Say. But the Queen's Council podcast have been putting out some good content. It's fun content. It's black, you know, it's black centered, but it's fun. The three ladies who do the show, you know, I like them a lot. I think they do a good job with that show. You guys check out that show. Make sure to leave comments too when you listen to those shows. The comments help them a lot. It helps, you know, it helps to keep them pushing and putting out the content. I recently commented on one of the shows, and I see one of the sisters responded to me about 45 minutes ago. So when I'm done here, I'll go back and engage the sister in her comment to my previous comment. You know, and the same thing with with all the shows, especially now that we're all on YouTube. You know, when you check out the content, leave a comment. You know, that's going to encourage them to keep going. To continue with the paper, right? And this is a short episode today because the paper is a short paper, and you know, there's not a lot of questions and comments in the chat room. Although Kevin Carefoy too just said, everyone watching, please give a like so the YouTube algorithm can promote this video. Please also share and subscribe. I echo those sentiments. I'd appreciate it. Let's see if we can get more folks discovering our videos, if you don't mind. So help us by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing if you haven't already. So to continue, secondly, each nationalist movement adopted its own tactics in the common struggle according to the circumstances it had to face. These different circumstances arose not only from the various policies of the metropolitan powers, but also from the historically induced attitudes of the different African peoples. In Tanganyika, for example, the first task of the nationalist movement was to renew the self-confidence of a people who had old and bitter memories of ruthless suppression of revolt. Interesting, right? You got, and that's the thing, right? When you're dealing with a beaten people, right? Psychologically, etc., emotionally, and the like. Your first job is to boost their self-confidence, right? If you're a Pan-Africanist, your first job is to boost their self-confidence in relation to and along with the self-confidence of other peoples in the diaspora. One of the reasons why, and I know I talk about this a lot, but one of the reasons why the ADOS and the FBA groups have some, at least some internet momentum. Let's see what happens after the world opens up again fully. The reason why there's a lot of momentum there is because the people who are pushing the idea, right, are playing on the self-confidence of the people listening. I don't know if you guys have seen it recently, but and again, you know, this is what causes my love-hate relationship with the brother. But Dr. Umar Johnson has clearly now jumped on the wave, right? If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see I talked about it. He's clearly followed this wave, you know, this nativist wave, and he was talking about the actor, I think the guy's name was Daniel Kaluuya or something close to that, from Judas and the Black Messiah movie. And Daniel, in his interviews, you know, they go on those press junkets and stuff. In his interviews, he's speaking as Daniel. He's speaking in his British accent. The guy is from the UK. And Umar's out here talking about, I don't like the fact that he's emphasizing that British accent. If he's Pan-African, I don't mind him being in the role, but if he's not Pan-African, I have and so what's that really about? You know, that goes back to, like I mentioned, ADOS, FBA, but the precursor to some of that ADOS, FBA stuff, if you remember in Hollywood, it was Samuel Jackson talking about black folks from elsewhere come here and take their jobs, black folks' jobs and stuff like that. And you know, that became a wave for a minute. That waved itself right into, you know, the beginnings of this ADOS movement. In fact, if I had to guess, I would think that whole discussion was big. And I know there's always been a nativist rhetoric, right? There's always been that. But in recent times, it really escalated after Samuel Jackson complained about the British actors. In fact, I think Samuel Jackson was complaining about the same Daniel Kaluuya guy when he was in the movie Get Out, which was a big hit, right? Which is why I suspect those guys are really complaining, because of how well the film did. But anyway, I digress. I don't want to get too deep into that stuff. You guys have heard me talk about this before, but a large part of that stuff is because folks realize that if I boost the ego and the self-confidence of a people, I have a customer for life. And that's what Umar and Tariq's and Yvette Carnell's and Tone Talks, that's what they're really doing out here. They're cultivating customers, right? The first thing these guys do next is start selling the t-shirts, right? They get customers. In the chat room, I see NYC Beauty says Tariq is an agent. He doesn't even live around his own people. Umar is an opportunist. Where is the school he is supposed to have built? Yeah, that's one of the questions that still carries on. You know, did he buy a school? Didn't he? And all this stuff. But it just shows you what Nyerere is talking about here, that the first thing you have to do, right? Because, you know, ADOS and FBA is like a nativist movement, or, you know, a native nationalist movement. And so the first thing they're trying to do is they're trying to renew the confidence of the people, who frankly are bitter because of what they went through historically. And I can't knock that. I understand it, but they feel that other black folks who look like them but come from different locations within the diaspora are doing better than them. That's Tone Talk's whole thing. Africans come here and do better than blacks because Africans have more money and blah, 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 blah. Right? So, you know, I agree with this second point that Nyerere is pushing. The tactics that you have to adopt will depend on the circumstances the folks have faced. The problem, again, is the tactics that those here are carrying out is causing a division from the rest of the diaspora, and that's the problem. And they're doing this stuff for their own personal gain. That's a huge problem I have, right? But the idea is a fundamental idea. Depending on the circumstances, that's how you approach the people. To continue. Before I continue, KW Dawn 7 comes through and says, if you don't want other so-called black people to play in movies, then make your own movies. But that might be asking too much. See, that's the thing I say. Listen, these Euros are putting their money up and making these movies. You're not putting your money up. And it's real lame to me that your complaint is to your oppressors, right? Why are you choosing them and not choosing us? Yeah, I mean, that's just real weak to me, right? Make the movies you want to see. What was I reading just a little while ago, maybe an hour and a half ago? I was reading something, and they were talking about, just before I started the show today, just a little fun fact. I was reading this article, and they were talking about Coming to America, the original Coming to America. If you guys who are old enough to remember that film, or who've seen it over the years, there was a white guy in that film, heavyset white guy, a comedian named Louis Anderson. And the question was asked, I guess, of Arsenio Hall and maybe even Eddie Murphy as well. The question was asked, well, why was there a white guy in this film? In this Coming to America film? Why was this white guy in? And Arsenio said something like, look, I like Louis, but I think Paramount Films insisted we have a white guy in the film, right? That's the golden rule. The man with the gold makes the goddamn rule. When they make anything that's a quote-unquote black film, there has to be some white boy running around in the film. That's a rule. And I saw someone comment on Twitter and say something like, yeah, back in those days, we were forced to have a white guy in the film. But these days, we're not forced to have a white guy as much as we're forced to have certain types of black folks in a film. But even that's rubbish. That's a rubbish take. You're not paying attention. When Don Cheadle did the Miles Davis film, they created a white boy out of thin air as a character in that film. There was no white guy involved in Miles' story. So if you want to get around that, if you want to get around, well, what happened in the Cynthia Erivo story, who's also a black Brit? They had some white guy in there who was like a savior type role, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like, if you don't want that kind of stuff, fund your own films. In the chat room, Kevin Care482 says, all this FBA, ADOS is just a waste of time. They think that the Muzungu supremacists will see them different from other black people. I saw in the comment on Twitter that an FBA ADO say they are a different ethnic group. This is mind-boggling. Absolutely. Kevin Care goes on to say, ADOS, FBA are burning both sides of the candle. KW Don 7 has a comment. He says, I believe Umar did acquire buildings, but he in over his head with regards to the amount of money needed to restore them to a functional school, along with no functional plan to cover operating costs. NYC Beauty says, when I first started my project on photographing and promoting the beauty of black women, I had an Italian woman tell me I am a racist. Oh, the irony, right? The irony. I see we got about 10 or so people inside, watching this with us live. You guys, the other guys besides Kevin Care, KW Don 7, and NYC Beauty, you guys can also comment as well. You don't have to be silent partners in these readings. The more comments we get, the more dynamic the show flows. And it's usually a pretty beautiful thing when we have more commentary going on. But I appreciate the three of you who are commenting at this time. Right? Now that I don't appreciate you guys, I'm just saying there's more people here who can hop on and drop some comments. In other countries, the job from the beginning was to keep control of a movement which was in danger of rushing into disaster. Both of these strategies are relevant to our new struggle for African unity. Applied to the new circumstances, they mean that different areas may advance on the road to unity at different speeds, and that the method of advance will vary according to the conditions now existing. which are, in part, a result of the tactics which had to be used in the struggle for national sovereignty. Thus, it will happen that in some parts of Africa, a loose association of states, with consultation on matters of mutual interest and the constant exchange of visits, is all that is possible in the first stage. In other areas, a common market and joint action on certain economic questions may be attainable, while political association of any type is rejected by the people. In still other combinations of countries, a political association without any real economic integration may be welcomed, and in a few, the formation of some sort of federation might be possible. Again, continent-wide discussions on certain matters, even without commitment to the decisions, will be fruitful. Right? So that's, Nyerere is laying out the idea here, the different combinations of which you could have unity, right, within countries on the continent. The last combination is the federation that he tried to get going in 1963, that many feel in Nkrumah sabotage. If you listen to our last episode, if you haven't, listen to that episode and come back. You'll understand this conversation a little bit better, right? But there's also these other combinations a lot of people don't even think can work, right? Constant exchange of visits, right? Sometimes that's all that's possible in that first stage, right? In other areas, common market, joint action on certain economic questions, right? Even though political association might be rejected, because that's a problem you would face, right? Who's governing over this, these, few people? This, by people I mean like countries. Who's governing over this collective of countries? In some instances, you may have a political association, but no real economic integration, which to me will be foolhardy. Which will, it'll be foolish to do that to me, right? But some people might welcome it. So these are different combinations of which we can go about getting this unity on the continent. And I would say, and in fact, this was something that was discussed in the early independence days of the Caribbean. This was discussed, joining these countries. In fact, it was discussed of making the Caribbean one power, right? Making the Caribbean one power, right? And that idea, a lot of that came behind how powerful West Indies were in cricket. The idea was to flourish a little bit more. Well, what if we all went, all came together and we put our best as one unit, right? The Windies. What would happen if we put our best together and go up against these other powers? And it was powerful, right? To continue. None of these things are the final goal, but all of them take us a step nearer. They all increase our consciousness of interdependence, increase our knowledge and understanding of each other, and they all include some part of the final inter-African pattern of thought. So long as we all remain conscious of the fact that our own particular form of association is not necessarily the answer in other areas, and so long as none of us ever forgets that we are really aiming at any or all of these developments, should be welcomed and supported, right? Africa has already started this mountain climb to unity, with advances at many different points. But we are now in a position where few of the climbers can see the overall picture. We have to rely instead on bulletins put out by those who are skeptical about the value of the exercise, if not actually hostile to its success. Under these circumstances, it is easy to understand the ease with which suspicion and even inter-African hostility can be engendered. Right? We are already seeing examples of this. There was constant talk of a Casablanca bloc and a Monrovia bloc, now of a Path Mecca bloc, right? Which we talked about in the last episode. The fact is that none of the conferences to which these names refer have abandoned the final aim. The differences between them lie in the ways of expressing the aim and the description of the path which must be followed to reach it. This can clearly be seen by a careful reading of the different communiques, which reveal much more common ground than differences. Obviously, the solution to this difficulty lies in reuniting the two all-African conferences. PAFMECA is a regional organization which regards itself as being a part of the All-African People's Conference and is on an entirely different basis. This would obviate the danger of unnecessary suspicion being engendered. And that's a good point he's making there. That's a good point. If you get everyone under the same umbrella, right? And you have full transparency, you know, you could have your different packs or blocks or groups or whatever. But if you can all have the same end goal, right? The end game, so to speak. And you are transparent with each other so that, you know, you're not having your conferences over here, but we weren't invited. And, you know, people start thinking about, well, what could they be talking about, right? What could those North Africans be doing, right, in those meetings over there, right? If you bring a summit of groups together, in fact, what I believe would happen oftentimes is more of the smaller groups will merge together when they realize, look, we're really doing the same thing and discussing the same ideas, right? In the chat room, Kevin Kerr says to me, look what happened in the 2018 World Cup. The French team, full of Africans and Caribbean blacks, destroyed traditionally powerful teams en route to the championship. And that's the thing, like, if you look at most World Cup winners in recent years, right, it's a bunch of black, and I dare say brown, but you know my take on the whole concept of black and brown. But it's a lot of black folks on these teams, and you're right, the French is a great example. You go down that whole roster, there's a bunch of Africans and Caribbeans on that team. Kevin Kerr goes on to say, we are a great people united. They see this and they fear it. You know, can you imagine in the 60s and 70s of Trinidad, you know, from Trinidad up to the Bahamas? Can you imagine with the natural resources that some of those countries have, right? And you created a nation, right? A Caribbean nation that allowed labor to move from border to border, right? Because remember, Haiti was strong back in the day. Haiti really didn't collapse until 1980 something. I want to say it was 88 or something like that, right? I could actually remember when it happened, right? There was a time where the Haitian dollar was as strong as the American dollar, right? Can you imagine bringing all those small islands together where people can go to Trinidad and work in the oil industry, could go to Jamaica and work with bauxite, right? You have some islands that were better suited for tourism and banking, right? But you do that as a unified group, man, right? To continue. There's only one way for us to really deal with this transitional problem. This is for us all to act now as if we already had unity. That's an interesting idea. In any one country, members of the government do not always like each other or approve of each other's public phraseology. But this is not allowed to become public. The arguments are conducted in the cabinet or the offices, not blazoned to the opposition. So it must be between African states now. Similarly, just as a prime minister does not interfere with the political support of a colleague, African states must accept the decision of the people in the different national units as regards their own leaders. When I was talking with Onita Say, that's one of the things we discussed, that can have its problems too. If you get one of these African leaders who's an a-hole, right? And by a-hole, the A is not for African. If you get one of these guys in there who becomes like a dictator, killing off some of their own people along these sub-ethnic lines and all this type of stuff, it should be that other African nations jump in there and deal with it, right? But again, that has its own problems too. So it's tough. It's tough. But Nyerere felt like let the individual nations deal with their problems, right? Deal with their issues. But we deal with the issues in these federations. We deal with the issues that are common from country to country, right? Yeah, Kevin Care 42 says the 1986 Baby Doc. Baby Doc or Papa Doc fled with the money. KW Don 7 says salute to Kevin Care 42. All right. To continue, this is very important. It means that any differences we have must be sorted out privately between ourselves. It means that we must avoid judging each other's internal policies, recognizing that each country has special problems which are its own concern, as well as problems which have inter-African repercussions. What do you guys think about that statement? I kind of like it, right? And I think it's something that we got to think about as individual Africans as well, right? Sort out our differences privately. Our opposition doesn't need to know, right? Allow individuals to do what they got to do, meaning that their internal policies are theirs, right? They have their own problems, right? Which is their concern, right? As well as problems that might concern other people around them. So we have to have some leeway for that as well. But I think this is good, even if you're talking about organizations. If you don't like one, Black or African political organization, hold that to yourself. Allow them to do their thing. Understand that they're their own entity. They're doing things their own way, right? You do things the way that you feel is the right way. Now, of course, that has its own problems too. That could lead to splintering, fragmentation. That's something that I think Nkrumah was pushing against, right? It means too that every opportunity must be taken to increase mutual understanding. You don't have to agree with everything that another national leader does or says, nor fail to learn from each other's mistakes or each other's successes. When we are generally concerned about the policies of another African state, the right people to address are the leaders of that state, and then in a brotherly spirit. We certainly should not address the world at large. And further, any private judgments we may make must be thought about with due humility. It is always easier to think dispassionately as a detached observer than it is to deal with a situation in which we are intimately involved. For the convictions which drove present-day African leaders into politics have their disadvantages. Toleration is not a virtue which lives easily with emotional fervor. It is thus sometimes difficult for us to recognize that the limitations of our own position are not shared by our colleagues, or alternatively, that they may have difficulties which cannot be brushed aside in the pursuit of our common aim. Many of us in East Africa believe that our best path to unity may be through a regional association. This would bring us more immediate strengthening of our economies at the same time as showing to our people the benefits of unity. The federation of at least Kenya, Uganda, and Tanganyika should be comparatively easy to achieve. Boy, if he only knew. Well, he kind of did know. He soon learned. Right? We already have a common market and run many services through the Common Services Organization, which has its own central legislative assembly and an executive composed of the prime ministers of the 3 states. This is the nucleus from which a federation is the natural growth. The unavoidable separation of our freedom struggles does leave an inheritance of very different constitutions in each of the 3 states. So the working out of the federal arrangements will be complicated. So he acknowledged how complicated it would be, right? It will be necessary for the federal structure to avoid upsetting the delicate balance of local interests, which has been incorporated into the several constitutional instruments. But this in itself is no bad thing. The development is so important that the peoples involved must understand clearly the purpose, the advantages, and the surrender of national sovereignty which federation implies. And this is what I always talk about. You got to be very clear of what is the benefits, right? And they don't mention it, at least not in this sentence, but you got to be aware of the punishments that occur, right, if you don't unify. One thing must be clear: once a federation has been established by the will of the people, it must not be allowed to break up again. It may expand or merge into a still larger unit, but its component parts will have made up a new body politic which cannot be chopped up. The Federation of East Africa must be well considered, both for its own sake, because it must be a step towards total African unity. Once it has been established, nothing must be allowed to fragment it. Certainly, African unity will not be easy to attain, but equally certain it can be won if the peoples of Africa so determine. As I have said before, the role of African nationalism is different, or should be different, from the nationalism of the past. We must use the African national states as instruments for the reunification of Africa, and not allow our enemies to use them as tools for dividing Africa. African nationalism is meaningless, is anachronistic, and is dangerous if it is not at the same time Pan-Africanism. And that ends the paper. In the chat room, I see KW7 says, how does the unification of Africa confront the divided loyalties of the northern part of Africa being a part of the Arab League, i.e. countries like Sudan and Somalia as Islamized states? Are Islamized states. KW7, that's a great question, and one that I posed to Onitase from the pro-black perspective when we did that joint show on Saturday, the most recent episode of the show. what you might really have to do is just focus on the quote-unquote sub-Saharan countries and ignore the northern country. As only time I say put it, and I agree, the power that you could generate with sub-Saharan Africa, if you can get it into a federation, would be so much so that you would be working with the Islamized or the Arab League North African countries from a position of power. And that to me is like the only way you can really do it. You got to get yourselves together, get ourselves together, right, in the quote-unquote sub-Saharan Africa, create that power base, that nation. And when you deal with these countries in the north, you deal as a unified bloc that has really the power, right? Because a lot of the resources in the continent is in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And so you deal with them in that way. KW-7 goes on to say Morocco withdrew from the OAU in 1984 and just rejoined the African Union in 2017. All right? That's the only way that can work. And it's important that we get on that soon enough, because my fear is that the Islamizing of the continent isn't done with yet. And I think you got to get this going amongst our folks, in West, Central, and East Africa. If you could get that strong, right, get that on a world power status, those Arabs in the north and those Islamized Negroes in the north and northeast and stuff, they would have to deal with you from a place of power. That's what I think. I agree with Onita say in that thought. Forget about the north. Again, this is why I say, man, Africa and Africans have lost so much ground, right? That you might have to kind of give up on the north, right, and just focus on sub-Saharan Africa. KW-7, what are your personal thoughts on how to deal with the Arab problem, right, or the Islamized African problem, right? How do you, from your understanding of things, what do you think is the move to make? I'm going to take a quick station ID. I'll come back on the other side, read any comments, answer any questions to me, and we'll wrap up the show for tonight.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
And also check out the Queen's Council podcast as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the paper. I hope you guys all gave the video a thumbs up. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up. We need those thumbs ups. It helps us a lot. There's 10 people listening, only 5 thumbs up, guys. Make sure give a thumbs up to the video. Trust me, it helps us grow the channel. As small as the channel is right now, with your thumbs up, it can grow the channel even more, especially down the road. So let's get into the habit of hopping on. Hit the thumbs up button, all right? Well, there's no more questions or comments, and I finished the paper. Want to thank everyone who came through today. KW Don 7, Kevin Care 42, NYC Beauties. Make sure you guys check out the NYC Beauties YouTube channel. In the chat room, I also have up, I'll post it again, I have the link to the Discord. Just download the app, it's free. Click the link, join the Discord, and let us know that you're there. You know what you're there for. Are you there to help with the curriculum, African-centered curriculum that we've been talking about? Or maybe you're just a fan of the show and you want to hang out with us on Discord. You can do that as well. All right? Until next time, guys, thanks again for tuning in. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.